Well, hello. I will resume our second symposium on Husserlian Phenomenology, presenting the next invited speaker. Ying-Chien is going to present a talk entitled The Structure of Selfhood and Affection in Husserl's Phenomenology and the Praxis of Mindfulness. Ying-Chien comes from Taiwan and completed her doctorate at the University of Cologne, the Husserl Archive, quite recently, in co-tutela with the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology of the Polish Academy of Science. Her dissertation is entitled The Passivity in Activity in Edmund Husserl's Phenomenology, an investigation of its functions in the genesis of subjectivity and the transcendental logic. She was a fellow of the Hans Böckler Foundation. Her main research areas are Husserl's phenomenology and epistemology. She studies the various intentional functions in cognition, such as cognition, feelings, affection, attention, and the role of the ego. She holds a postdoctoral fellowship at the National Tsing University in Hsinchu. I think I may have misspelled, I'm sorry, in Taiwan. So thank you very much, Ying-Chien, for inviting for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Flavio. Thanks a lot for the introduction, and thank you, Flavio, for the invitation. And I'm happy to be here to share. I'm happy to be here to share with you some of my ideas. This is my first time to use to apply phenomenology, the analysis of experience from Husserl to apply this analysis to another discipline, to the psychology and the practice of mindfulness. So I hope you find it interesting and productive. So I apologize that I don't have a PDF. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I have my draft. So I will show my draft in the screen, and I like to ask you that because it's still a draft, so not do any citations. So I hope I hope you can clearly see it and you can understand me better with the text because my accent. Okay, so I will begin my text. So the structure of selfhood and affection in Husserl's phenomenology and the practice of mindfulness. The application of mindfulness in psychotherapy, especially the use of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy in avoiding relapsing into depression, are well advanced. This research result indicates that the practice of mindfulness is helpful for emotional regulation. In this article, I will elaborate what kind of theory of subjectivity is implied in the practice of mindfulness. This article attempts to explain Husserl's account of the constitution of selfhood and of affection in our life stream of consciousness in order to develop a more complete view of who we are in the practice of mindfulness. The practice of mindfulness provides a path to the well-being of the person's emotional life. What underlies the practice of mindfulness is a particular image of the human mind, which is not just a brain, but a whole person with a psychic life that includes various types of activity, passivity, and embodied emotions. Moreover, subjectivity as a whole is not a substance that is fixed once and for all. Instead, the person's habituality can still be transformed through mental exercise. I will analyze the structure of attention in our living experience, which is related to affection on a passive level, as well as to interests, instincts, feelings of values, etc. Depression is generally classified as an affective disorder. If we thoroughly understand the relevant relationships between attention, emotions and affect feelings in our living experience, we can then further confirm from Husserlian phenomenological point of view the benefits of practicing mindfulness for emotional regulation. And in the stream of consciousness, emotion is not only a matter of affective feeling, but is also cognitive and is combined with the function of reason. In what follows, I will first discuss the intentional structure of mindfulness. As a kind of attention, mindfulness is a highly concentrated way of focusing on one object. For example, in the practice, we focus on our breath. Such highly concentrated attention is not something that we already naturally possess, but something that we have to achieve, we have to earn through practice and exercises, allowing us to strengthen the faculty of mindfulness. In Husserl's phenomenology, attention has a very close relationship with affection, emotion, tendency, and personal habituality. Although attention seems to be an intensive activity controlled by the eye, it is deeply influenced by the affective and emotional experience of the person. Attention is thus a complex intentional act, which is on the one hand, activity stems from the willing of the eye, and on the other hand is motivated passively by affection. Through the analysis of attention, we can see more clearly why the practice of mindfulness can have a beneficial impact on our emotional psyche life. I will use the Tibetan Buddhist literature of Langren from Tsongkhapa as a theoretical resource to discuss the relevant mental state in mindfulness. So this is the book. Langren is the Tibet's language, and it means the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Second part of this presentation, I will introduce my interpretation of the constitutive performance of consciousness and its relationship to the eye. At the deep level of the stream of consciousness, the eye doesn't perform active intentional acts, but only undergoes passive affective experience. And it is through such passive constitution that the eye is constituted as a person with her relatively abiding habituality. In this content, I will introduce some ideas about subjectivity from the point of view of the Buddhist tradition of Yogacara. Third, I will link Husserl's thoughts about the renewal, the erneuerung of the person with the topic of the transformation carried out by mindfulness. I'd like to claim that emotion and reason are not contradictory. They are intertwined in their functioning. A belief that properly understands the situation as it really is leads to a proper and a healthy feeling. The way of renewal is also the way toward what Husserl calls the genuine person or the authentic person, der echte Mensch. We can find that the training of emotion in the mindfulness of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition has an ethical implication that there is thus a bridge connecting emotion and the ethical life. The first section, the structure of attention in Husserl's theory of experience. From a phenomenological perspective, however, attention is an essential structure of our living experience. Attention is a spatial act of consciousness that has much to do with the interest, affection, and the emotion of the subject. In Husserl's theory of consciousness, attention has passive and active dimensions. The passive dimensions of attention is that of affection. In perception, the eye is affective, but it is not active prior to paying attention to an object. Attention is a process of transition from being awakened to being, from being unawakened to being awakened, from being unconscious to being conscious. The eye is awakened by the affecting object and the trigger of interest. And it is here that attention has its passive dimension. The active aspect then lies in the fact that I can direct my attention to a certain object. The eye is active and has control over its attention, but hasn't yet reached the act of willing. As Husserl tells us, The most highly relevant factors concerning affection are feelings, interests, drives, instincts, and even habitual evaluations. Affection is the prior stage of attention. Affection is the prior stage of attention, or even the foundation that grounds attention. In Husserl's theory of experience, passivity is the necessary ground for activity. No activity is possible without the underlying passivity. As already indicated, attention still hasn't reached the stage of an act of willing. Rather, it is more accurate to characterize attention as receptive. The activity of attention is not a reflection from the higher level that produce new thoughts or judgment. Instead, the activity of attention is solely receptive. It means to observe, to be aware of what appears and to stay with it. Husserl accordingly calls receptivity the lowest level of activity. The only way the eye participates actively is by allowing the appearing in the field of consciousness to be possible. Attention is also embodied. When I am affected and thus paying attention to the affecting thing, my bodily kinesthetic motility is also motivated. And because the tendency is embodied, paying attention to one's breath in the practice of mindfulness is also an embodied exercise. We can also see the relation between attention. We can also see the relation between attention and different kinds of affection in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of mindfulness. One description of mindfulness in Langren is the concentration on one object, so that one mind is continuously fixed on it. The mental state of mindfulness is one-pointed focus of mind. In Husserlian terms, mindfulness is the noetic side of intentionality. The phenomena of mind wandering stems from what could generally be characterized as laxity and excitement. Laxity and excitement are the chief obstacles to achieve genuine concentration. The second part, the I and the constitution of the person. In mindful-based cognitive therapy, mindfulness meditation brings the patient back to their present experience and puts mind-body in a harmonious coordination through breath. The patients return to their present experience, staying with the bare awareness and observing how beliefs and ideas leading to the destructive emotions appear in the mind, simply accepting the presence of such thoughts, while the I distances itself from its own old beliefs that lead to depression. The patient thereby become aware of the harmful thought pattern and try to free themselves from their own assumption. This description is the general description from the practice of mindfulness in a regulative therapy. From my point of view, a successful practice of mindfulness meditation lies in the fact that the I can detach itself from tendencies motivated by negative emotions. Instead, I can act as a pure observer with a high degree of concentration and attention. How is this distancing of oneself from one's own affective experience possible? Am I not identical with my affective experience? Who is actually watching and what is observed through the practice? The dialogue between phenomenology and the practice of mindfulness touches upon one of the deepest theoretical issues concerning selfhood in consciousness. Is there an identical abiding self, many different selves, or even a non-self in the string of consciousness? What kind of theoretical relationship between the I and its living experience is implied in the practice of mindfulness? In Embodied Mind, Vieira et al. Introduced the non-self view of mind in the meditative tradition of Buddhism. The mind is composed of 5 aggregates. The first, forms, body. The second, feeling, sensations. The third, perception, impulses. The fourth, dispositional formations. And the fifth, the consciousness. In the Buddhist tradition, the person is not a substantial self, but a complex configuration of material and mental events. There is no absolute substance. Rather, all events arise in mutual codependent genesis. For the Buddhist side, I use the literature from Dreyfus interpretation. In a Tibetan Buddhist meditation of Langren, according to Dzongkhapa, mindfulness is the main cause for samatha, which means serenity. Mindfulness is the essential factor that makes serenity possible. Based on serenity of mind, the meditator can contemplate the thing itself, observing whether or not there is indeed a substantial self between the 5 aggregates. This special insight into selflessness is called Vipassana. In Vipassana meditation, we have to carry out philosophical reflection in order to consider whether there is a concrete self as an abiding substance underlying all transitory experience of consciousness. But this requires samatha as a basic mental state, being free from the disturbance of affliction in order to get clear insight into selflessness. The meaning of the combination of samatha and vipassana meditation is thus that the practitioner can do in a perceptual, non-discursive way, not only in a reflective way, but only someone already reached the sainthood can have this special insight into selflessness in an evident and a perceptual intuitive way. Normal people can only reach thoughts of selflessness through reflective discursive reasoning. This part is in the third book of Langren. So I just showed the picture. So there are 3 volumes of this book, and the third volume is all about the samatha vipassana and how to practice and how to do the combination of the 2. From my point of view, in the theory of consciousness, there is a lot in common between Husserl's phenomenology and the Buddhist philosophy. But as Dreyfus points out, there are also different theories of consciousness in Buddhist philosophy. It is difficult to say that there is only one ultimate version. In Husserl's phenomenology, there are also different interpretations of the concept of the I. In my interpretation of Husserl, the I pole, which Husserl introduced in Ideas 1, is not the origin of all intentional constitutions. The I pole is only an abstract moment of one living experience. That is my interpretation. For example, in the perception of a glass, we can distinguish the I pole, who is watching the glass, and the object pole of the glass, which appears in my consciousness. However, the I pole is not only the place from which intentional activities radiate, it is also the place where the I undergoes passive experiences. In Ideas 1, Husserl writes, it is precisely a ray emanating from the I, or in reverse, direction of the ray toward the I. The I pole is not only the point of radiation, but also the point of irradiation. As Einstrahlungspunkt. point. The recognition of the I pole as a point of irradiation in Ideas 1 foreshadows Husserl's later genetic phenomenology. What is originally and constantly constitutive is not the activities coming from the I center, but also the passive consciousness within the string of consciousness. Passive constitution includes two directions of constitution. The constitution of the thinking of sedimentation into the underground of the life of consciousness, and the constitution of its reappearance, the awakening of the past meaning in the present. So every present I can still see, I can still experience, I can still use the meaning what I got from the past. Through the immanent passive constitutions of sedimentation and the reawakening in the string of consciousness, the person is constituted with her habituality. The key genesis in the passive constitution is affective motivation, which is effective within the life string of consciousness itself, without any active participation or intervention of the I. How meanings are restored from sedimentation, and how do they once again take their place in present experience are then the key question related to the affective motivations of the person. Dreyfus uses Yogacara traditions view to provide a Buddhist account of the person in our ordinary daily experience. In this tradition, there are 6 types of consciousness. Besides the 5 perceptual modes of sense consciousness, the seeing, hearing, smiling, tasting, and touching, there is still a 6th consciousness named basic consciousness to combine, to unify all the different kinds of consciousness. As Dreyfus indicates, the role of the notion of basic consciousness is to explain why the constantly changing stream of consciousness has its continuity. Besides the function of maintaining continuity, basic consciousness also serves as first the passive level out of which more active and manifest forms of awareness arise. And the second, this might analyze from the literature of Dreyfus. And the second, the background awareness. So the 6th consciousness, the basic consciousness has these 2 functions, has mainly these 2 functions. These 2 functions are very similar to Husserl's idea of passive constitution. Passive constitution is an underlying constantly constitutive process without which any activity is impossible. Passive synthesis also builds up a horizon of experience. The anticipations motivated by the present appearance shape the background horizon of the perception. We are not only seeing what is present, what is sedimented in the past, and what can be anticipated in the future are also co-present in the living experience. Our experience has the time dimension and a history. To sum up briefly, in Husserl's genetic phenomenology, we can understand the concept of selfhood in terms of the person, with her habituality arising from passive constitution. There is thus the theoretical possibility that we don't have to presuppose an identical stiff substance of the self as an I center from which all synthesis of consciousness come. The life stream of consciousness has its own immanent passive constitution, building up the continuity of the person with her habitual beliefs and emotions. So we are going to the 3rd part, transformation and mindfulness. The first section, the transformation of the person in the mental life of consciousness. The constitution of the person is not a finished, but an open process. It is the process of becoming. The person can therefore be changed through exercises in living experience. Every activity in consciousness will establish a meaning, which will constitutively sink to the underground of the life stream of consciousness and can be reawakened in the present. The results of such constitution will not vanish when the present passes, but will will remain sedimented in the history of the life stream of consciousness. One of the reasons for the possibility of transformation, however, lies in the fact that subjectivity is not a strictly identical and a non-changeable substance. Rather, subjectivity is composed of different types of activities and passivities in consciousness. When new and different sorts of activity and passivity come to play, new habitual beliefs and emotions will also be constituted. What is to be transformed is therefore habituality with its fragile beliefs. A belief is a judgment, but a habitual belief has its personal character. It is a conviction or the stance taking, die Stellungnahme, or the Überzeugung of the person. Yet conviction is related to an act of willing, and every act of willing has its passive underground, which is tendency. Tendency has a direction, so willing has its passive level, its tendency. The tendency has a direction, but it is still blind and driven by affection. The habitual belief, which is passively constituted through being sedimented and reappearing, is also closely combined with tendency and affection at the lower level. So habitual level is not like the solely judgments in a high level, but through the habituations or habitual beliefs is also very closely combined with affection and tendency at the low level. Habitual beliefs are thus very closely related to tendencies and affections. They can mutually constitute each other. My affective emotion can even serve as evidence to confirm my evaluative judgment. For example, plastic bags are very useful. My perception of their usefulness is confirmed every time my positive evaluation of them from bottom-up constitution occurs. But a belief can also influence affection through top-down constitution. So top-down, so beliefs can also influence our affection or our emotion, our affection or our tendencies, because emotion can also in a very high level. So in my interpretation, affection is in a low level. Plastic bags may be useful, but since they are not friendly to the environment, a negative evaluation can be established and maintained effective. The corresponding tendency and the affection would grow through repeating. The new tendency can even be so strong that a new habituality can be constituted. It is in this way that in top-down constitution, belief can deeply influence affective feelings and tendencies. And when a force of corresponding affection and tendency is enhanced strongly enough to be habitual, the judgment is slowly constituted as a new habitual belief. That is habitual conviction as well. From Husserl's thoughts on the constitution of habituality, then we can see that emotion and the reason, the affection and the belief are not contradictory, but are intertwined and function together. Emotion is both embodied and cognitive. It involves not only affective embodied feelings such as liking or disliking, but also our perception of value and even our intellectual judgment of it. In one of Kaito's articles, Husserl discussed the idea of renewal, the Erneuerung. What he means is that some certainties of our habitual beliefs are very fragile because their affective motivations often come from outside without our giving them any real consideration. In childhood, we just took over and developed many beliefs from our family and our social communities. This kind of decision comes from foreign and even blind motivations and inclinations. But if our decision comes from foreign motives, then this decision is not genuine, not authentic. nicht echt, nichts echt. A genuine belief is genuine not only because it is originally fulfilled in intuition and proved evidently as true, but more importantly, because the underlying motivating tendency stems from my own decision. Only in this sense is my decision free and real. Husserl also names it free reason, die freie Vernunft. For Husserl, making a judgment is a kind of practical action. The intentional structure of making a judgment is similar to the structure of making a decision, because making a judgment means that I am convinced of this knowledge. This knowledge is not just a truth, but a truth of which I am convinced and to which I may even be devoted to. I am loyal to my belief. If we have a habitual conviction, then our belief will be consistent with the belief, so that we are loyal to ourselves. But in everyday life, we can encounter inhibitions, the hemomen that hinder the decisions of practical reason. From the inhibition, however, there emerge a striving toward an unrestricted life, striving to Hemmungslosen Leben. We have an instinct to resolve unpleasant inhibition and to remove the uncomfortable uncertainty. Then we have to call upon reason in order to change our habitual convictions, adjusting to the new situation and again depicting the situation truly, so that practical life can continue. For Husserl, then this is a genuine reason, the echte Vernunft. And such change and the renewal of habitual beliefs is the transformation of the person. Being critical of the ungrounded, uncertain, and fragile judgments and changing them to genuine judgments is a way of liberation, Befreiung. In this sense, Husserl says that every theoretical reason is also a practical reason. Reason is not only theoretical, but also evaluating and practical. The real reason, the echte Vernunft. Reason also has its grounding in perception. Every higher level activity has its underlying passivity, so that activity is authentic and can be fulfilled in the original intuitive experience. For example, theoretical judgment is grounded in perception. Axiological evaluation can be grounded in the affective perception of value. And the practical act of willing can be grounded in the experience of tendency. The change of habitual beliefs thus has to begin from the lower level of tendency and affection, not from the higher level of pure intellectual judgment, since affection and tendency are what is originally itself given in the experience at the pre-reflective level. So in the practice of mindfulness, we are not only from the higher level to control our attention, because we cannot control our attention. It's always have distraction. We have to go from the below, from cultivating our tendency and affection, so that we can influence the higher level of attention. Okay. For Husserl, to be genuine person through renewal is also to shape a blissful life. Das glückselige Leben. We can see the correspondence in Husserl's thought. Joy follows if we reach truth. Fulfillment of empty intention with evidence is also a satisfaction. We shape a blissful life through the path of renewal that leads to becoming a genuine person. Genuine person can lead us to constructive emotions. The transformation is not a causal mechanism, but a mental process, a mental exercise in the psychic life of human consciousness. And the second section, the value of love. Much research in the literature points to the relationship between compassion and mindfulness. In Husserl's Phenomenology, love has a special place. Love is the only value that doesn't come from affection stemming from the object, from the object outside, from foreign others, but from the person itself. Husserl writes, love-inspired valuation flows from the subject toward the individual object and imparts or bestows a value to the latter that does not derive from the object itself, but ultimately from the ego. This means that at the deep level, the tendency of love comes from what is my own. The value of love has the primacy place among the other values. The value of love has primacy because it comes from the depth of personality. It has a personal character and is an absolute subjective value. When I decide for the value from my true conviction, the following practical alternate is not just any arbitrary alternate, but an absolute one. Das absolute Sollen. The decision based on this kind of tendency toward love would then be genuine and free and true to myself. From my point of view, it is a wholesome direction in which to cultivating the tendency through mindfulness to be true, genuine, authentic, and blissful. The third section, ethical implications of the practice of mindfulness. The kind of transformation of habituality in our mental life of consciousness has an ethical character. The theory of transformation implied in the practice of mindfulness meditation in the Buddhist tradition corresponds to virtue ethics. Generally, the goal of ethical life in virtue ethics is to develop the good habitual virtues in order to reach the flourishing of our well-being and the mental state of happiness. In the Buddhist theory of consciousness, there is no such term as emotion, but only talk of afflictions. Afflictions mainly come from attachment, hatred, and ignorance. There are many different kinds of afflictions. In the traditional Buddhist practice of mindfulness, practitioners cultivate concentration by eliminating laxity and excitement, which are caused by different kinds of afflictions. To liberate oneself from one's afflictions corresponds to Hellenistic philosophy of becoming free from mental disturbance. Ignorance is not exactly an emotion or affective feeling, but an absence of wisdom. Alternatively, we can say that it is like a false belief, that a false judgment that doesn't truly describe the world or the situation as it really is. The absence of wisdom is an important part of what results from inappropriate emotions such as hatred, craving, etc. Thus, in Buddhist tradition, ignorance belongs to the category of affliction. This means that our emotions often involve appraisals of values. They are quotation from Nussbaum. Intelligence responds to our perception of values. In this way, emotion is not only embodied, but also cognitive. And what triggers our emotion is deeply bound with habitual beliefs. Here there is no dichotomy between emotion and reason. They are intertwined. A good decision from reasonable considerations accordingly also yields a proper positive emotion. As Nussbaum says, quotation, a central part of developing an adequate ethical theory will be to develop an adequate theory of emotions. The emotional ethical life at the passive level is habitual, but training our affective emotion entails an ethical improvement. Thus, to cultivate our personal habitual beliefs is so that it is in accord with real reason is also to nourish the flourishing of our well-being. Emotions which are related to the living body and to cognitive belief can be changed, cultivated, and transformed through exercise in the experiencing life of consciousness, leading toward becoming a real and a blissful human being. And the conclusion, in the practical use, the conception of mindfulness is very ambiguous. Husserl himself never directly discussed this mindfulness, but he does address the theory and the method of Buddhism in his article, Socrates and When the Buddha, from 1925-26. Around the period, he wrote the Kaito articles and was focusing on the constitutive structure of renewal of the person. Husserl regards Buddhism as a kind of transcendental theory. There is a possible way out for him, transcendentalism. The world is merely a phenomenon in subjectivity, quotation ends. He compares phenomenology as dealing with theoretical truths and Buddhism as dealing with practical truths. While phenomenology is a science of theory, Buddhism is a science of practical will. Both sciences execute an epoche, one in theoretical sense and one in practical sense. In this article, I have outlined the structure of attention. So this is some summary, which has affection and the tendency as its grounding at a passive level. The ethical transformation implied in the practice of mindfulness in the Buddhist tradition involves cultivating our habitual affection by changing our false belief to a genuine one that is closer to the truth. Three main points are discussed in the dialogue between Husserl phenomenology and the practical of mindfulness. The conclusion of this presentation. First, emotion and the reason function intertwined through the immanent constitution of consciousness at the passive level. Beliefs can deeply shape our affective feeling. Both phenomenology and the practice of mindfulness demonstrate the relationship between thoughts and the feeling. Cognitive, emotional, ethical, and cognitive, emotional, ethical, and the practical aspects are all relevant dimensions for maintaining a mental health. Second, the practice of mindfulness that not only entails training our attention, but involves an ethical transformation of habitual beliefs into real beliefs and the cultivation of affective feelings and emotions in a direction toward constructive ones. The third, subjectivity is composed of various active and passive constitutive process of consciousness, and is not a substance underlying all manifold changes and maintaining static, rigid identity from the beginning to the end. The person is always in the process of becoming. What this becoming results in depends on what this becoming results in depends on which intentional mental exercise we do. So thank you for the attention.